I'll give a quick overview on what we do. And, I'm the big bad VC. You talk to all the entrepreneurs, so I'm the bad guy, the guy in the dark side, I guess. Qualcomm Ventures. How many people know Qualcomm? Okay, reasonable. Okay, so we're a telecom company. We were the first to get CDMA as a technology that can be used for cellular communication. Since then, GSM people are adopted as 3G. Now all the 3G standards have CDMA, and then we have LTE, and so we play in the wireless communication space. So I'll talk about that. My background is in wireless as well. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering, bachelor's here in India, master's in the US, and then I spent 10 years doing startups. So I'm not completely on the dark side. I worked in startups. I was an entrepreneur after all. So what we do is, the telecom industry or the mobile wireless industry has actually changed in the last 20 years significantly. 25 years ago, there was no mobile wireless cellular industry. So a lot of transformation has taken place, and Qualcomm has played a vital role. Many other companies have as well. But for the ecosystem to keep moving further, people need to innovate. And innovation always comes, and I can say that categorically, always comes from startups. Because when you're a startup, you're like going in already 4 wickets down, or already you're bowling when the opposite score is like 200 for none, right? So you have to innovate to compete in the market. You cannot do the status quo. If you do the status quo, you're going to get crushed. So you're going to do things that are different, whether you're going to uncover the latent market demand, or you're going to find a new business model that doesn't work so far, or you're going to innovate on technology. That's the only way startups can survive, right? So, which means innovation will always come from startups. So Qualcomm still retains like a startup mode, but still, we are a 15,000 people company. We cannot be a startup, right? So for the wireless ecosystem to grow, we need to work with the startups. So that was the crux to forming Karthee Madasamy. So we started 10 years ago, basically to invest in promising startups that push the ecosystem forward. So 10 years ago, even in the US, it looks a long time ago now, but 10 years ago, people only used cell phones for voice. That's it, not even SMS. Today, that's not the case. 6-7 years ago, there was no Facebook. 3 years ago, there was no Twitter. So things have changed very, very substantially. And so the idea is that Qualcomm will support some of these companies early on and provide financial funding. Provide funding. At the same time, it's not a grant. It's not just a goodwill charity. No, it doesn't really work that way. I think the previous speaker kind of emphasized that it doesn't work that way. You have to. When you know that you are in survival mode, that's the only way. That's the only time you're going to innovate, right? Necessity is the mother of invention, right? So it's actually a funding to take equity. So we fund, but we take equity. So when the companies do well, we get an upside. But when the company doesn't do well, our money basically goes down. Right? It was risk sharing. So we've done 75 companies, we invested in 75 companies across the globe. US, Europe, Israel, India, China, Japan, Korea. We started investing in India about 3 years ago. So I started the investment process here. So we have about 5 investments in the mobile, wireless, semiconductor space. Mapma India, Palia, Capillary Technology, some of you might know. Anyway, that's the quick background. Let me talk for 5 minutes about mobile wireless and what I really want to convey here. Right? I think the key way to create value is to find inflection points. Right? If things going like 5% growth, it's not that interesting. Because population grows at 1 to 2%. Things grow at 5%. If something is growing at 5%, it's not that interesting. In fact, if something is growing at 10%, even that's not that interesting. If suddenly something grows at 100% year over year, 200% year over year, that's what we call this inflection point. That's what we call as hockey stick, right? So as a startup, that's where you're going to extract a lot of value, because everybody thinks that, hey, it's going like this, and then suddenly you hit the inflection point, but you're the only one who are ready for it, and then you capture the most value, right? So the inflection point is what most of the startups look for. Okay, is there an inflection point? And not many people might subscribe to your theory of when the inflection point is going to happen. And in some areas, you might think there's an inflection point that's going to happen, or it might not happen. That's the risk that you guys take as startups. But ultimately, when you're looking at a space, looking at something, that's what you're looking at. Where is the inflection point, right? So let's talk about a couple of inflection points in India on the mobile world. 2003, 2004, 2005, you come here, cellular connectivity is still growing. We had some projections at 50 million mobile connections will be there. We were at 30, so we were grossly underperforming against most of the forecasts. Expensive, call for expensive, and whatnot. And then Reliance entered, basically bust the seam open. They said, okay, we need to bring the cost structure to the point that making landline call or making mobile call should be different. That's what they did, and then that just completely burst open the thing of mobile wireless, or the mobile connection here. Then from 30, very quickly went to 50. From 50 to 100, it took us 6 months. And then every 6 months, we've been adding 50 million new connections. Every 6 months, 50 million connections. That's every 6 months we're adding UK. So that's inflection, right? So now we're sitting at 550 million. Even if you reduce for all the double counting of SIMs that people have, we're still at 450 million connections. So 2005, or even 2006, early 2006, somebody's sitting here and saying we are at 50, 55 million connections. 9 times growth in 5 years, nobody would have expected. Right? That's what inflection point is. That's what hockey stick growth is. Right? And India is an interesting, little bit peculiar market in the sense that guessing this inflection point is very hard, which is actually great for you guys, because if it is very hard to guess, which means bigger companies are completely clueless, because they are not going to make a big bet because they have to report to their Wall Street or the Wall Street here to say, okay, what's my earnings here? I'm not going to take big risks. So that's the opportunity. But the inflection point, finding the inflection point is a little bit hard. I'll give you one another example. 2 years ago, now this is even more recent. 2 years ago, if you go tell anybody, come on, guys, how come we don't have any local Indian phone brands? Everyone will say, come on guys, it's very hard to compete in this market. Nokia has so much market muscle, they have deep pockets, Samsung has deep pockets, they have scale, they supply to the world, they have a lot of economies of scale, and they have varieties of handsets, a lot of learning curve. It's going to be very hard to compete. That was the case 2 years ago. Today, 20% of the handsets that are sold in India are made by Indian OEMs. Micromax, and I guess you probably have seen that, Micromax, Max Mobile, Lemon, Carb, and you name it, and there are new brands coming in as well. 2 years, 20%. That's 20% is we sell about 160 million handsets a year. So 20% like 30 million handsets suddenly, out of nowhere, Indian OEMs have taken. Why? Finally, the technology has come to the point where it was, even if you're a little bit inefficient, it's okay. And then you could go get it from China, you go get what the type of handsets you want to go get from China. You can just put the software, you can put the branding, you can go to the market itself. You don't have to have long development cycles. Just 5 years ago, if you go talk to Nokia or some people that work here, if you ask what is the development cycle of a phone, they'll say 18 months, 18 to 24 months. That's what it takes from concept. Okay, I want to have a candy bar phone with this type of features. From starting that plan to finally releasing to the market was 24 months. So that changed. That changed when you can go get the hardware from China, and then you can put the software customization. And our Indian guys know branding, how to talk to the Indian customers. They're able to get 20% market share. Today, Nokia and Samsung are very worried. They're trying to figure out how I'm going to survive with this barrage of handsets from the Indian guys. So that's an inflection point. In both cases, last 3 years I've been telling a lot of the startups, go do handsets. It's not that hard. You should go do handsets. A lot of people did small stacks. Mango Technologies, one company that did a good stack in the UI layer, and we even bought them. But I've been telling them, go do phones. It's okay. It's not that hard. You might need a little more capital, but you can do it. And there's a virgin opportunity here. Today it's very hard now because 20%. Everybody's now entering into the market. Now we've started to go in, it's very hard because it's status quo now. Now doing local OEM branded phones is status quo. Right? So the key point is that before it becomes status quo, before you will probably have to think ahead. Right? You need to figure out where the inflection point is going to come, and then that's where you need to think through. Here's all the fundamental parameters out there. Based on this, I think this inflection point is going to come. And it's okay if you're wrong. And that's one of the points that the previous speaker mentioned, right? It's okay, once you're in, once you're doing the startup, you will figure out, okay, even if your initial guess was wrong, you have that momentum, you have that, that fighting ability, you will figure out, okay, what the next inflection point will be, or where whatever I have developed can be used, and you'll find it, right? But going in, it's very important in my mind to figure that out. Am I going to go after a hockey stick somewhere there that I'm going to spend the first 18 months now to get there? By the time that the inflection point occurs, I'm ahead, and I get to capture most of the value. Right? That's what, because you're all here to capture value and create wealth for yourself as well. Right? It's not charity either, right? So I believe there's going to be an inflection point that's going to come up, and it's up to the entrepreneurs to figure out how to capture the value, right? So the concept of value-added services, right? So how many people know value-added services, like ringtones, and everybody have used it, right? So in India, our ARPU, average revenue per user, is probably one of the lowest in the world. Okay? It's really low. It's like average is now $3-4. It's even falling now. It's like 200 rupees and falling. What from just reported 177 rupees, right? So it's $4 and it's still falling. And if you look at how much value-added service takes there, and even in value-added services, how much innovative value-added services. I'm going to call ringback tones and ringtones and wallpapers as not necessarily that innovative, right? If you look at database, some innovative thing, it's less than 1%. Right? And in that percentage, we are the worst in the world. Okay? So our ARPU is lower, which is okay, our demographics is different, fine, that's fine. But even in that ARPU, what percentage is used for innovative services, we are the lowest in the world. Maybe there are a few countries which is like really economically backward that might be lower, but we are the lowest, right? Which is sad, but it's also interesting, because if you offer innovative services, you have urgent market. Today, you go to the big guys, they all say, oh, well, I make this much money on CRPT and make this much money on wallpaper, and they're printing cash today, so they're all fine. But if you go a step back and say how innovative that is, they're getting squeezed in terms of margin, but they're still making money, so they're okay. They know that they're not focused on this. So now let's take a step ahead. So now, how many people know about 3G launches? Okay, so 3G is launching, Tata Docomo launched, Airtel is going to launch in a few weeks. But in the next 3 to 6 months, all the operators will launch. Right? So here's one thing, one thought. So today, if you want to launch the 2G, which is the CDMA1X or the GSM, if you launch innovative data service, there's not as much spectrum available. So even if you want to do it, you're going to have this hard problem. So you won't have a data connection, will be very bad, especially in the peak hours, you won't be able to do it. For example, we have a company called Apalia. It's a mobile live TV video service, right? So we invested in them because, I'll come to the point why we invested in them. But today, if you want to watch their service on a 2G phone, on a 2G service during commute hours, it's horrible. It's very bad because you don't get a good data connection and all those things. So anyway, which is why maybe a lot of the people are not working on it. But let's say 3G, what happens with 3G, right? So here's one fundamental thing that you guys should think about. So let's take Airtel in Bangalore. They have 900 MHz spectrum in GSM, and they got 2.1 GHz spectrum for 3G. So let's take all the users in 2G, get all their traffic, whatever data traffic they do, whatever the BlackBerries out there, all the traffic. Take all that and let's put it into the 3G spectrum that they got. Okay? They still got the 2G spectrum, but I'm assuming that let's take all these things and put it on the 3G spectrum. They still won't use more than 20% of the 3G spectrum. Which means they've been operating under very, very, very tight spectrum, congestion and whatnot. Suddenly, you're going to be sitting on a spectrum that if you're just going to do what you're doing right now, it's only going to take 20% of the spectrum. There's 80% that's unfilled. And they're still going to have a 2G spectrum. So I was just hypothesizing that everything can go into the 3G and still only take 20%. A lot of people still going to use the 2G spectrum as well, which means the 3G spectrum is going to be very, very unutilized. So far, all the data services have been very, very, very hard to do. Suddenly it's going to get very, 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 very easy. Our operators today don't know what kind of innovative data services that we can go after, because suddenly it's a rift for them. They've been operating under a constrained environment. Okay, I have a small spectrum. I gotta always compromise between data versus voice. If I gotta support some data, then I drop some calls. My subscribers are gonna get angry. So how do I do that? Suddenly they're gonna sit in a place where spectrum is abundant. Okay. So my belief and Qualcomm's belief, and I think you guys also should think about this, that this is going to be the inflection point for value-added services, rich value-added services, right? You know, so database services. Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, I think that's the main point that I want to cover. Anyways, so value-added services with 3G, you probably have a very interesting inflection point opportunity here. Any questions?
Yeah. See, in Europe, the 3G and all these services were launched, I think 4 or 5 years back, and the telecom operators are still bleeding there. So where do you see, the all infrastructure and all to get in profit? So the 3G coming in India, and they are making so much of money that value-added services takes potential business. So where do you see that time frame to come? Because right now in Europe it is still bleeding.
I don't know if it's still bleeding, but I agree with you that it was bleeding for a while, right? And they also didn't follow the basic economic concept, which is, when you pay something for spectrum, which is some cost. Just because you paid something doesn't mean that you can charge something higher, right? How much you can charge depends on how much the customer is willing to pay. That's it, right? You can put a price whatever way you want, but if the customer's willingness to pay is not there, they're not going to pay, right? I think that for the operators there, it took a long time to realize that. Even now, if you go to Europe and then if you do this, if you're in one country and then roam into other country, the amount of things that you got to pay is like really, really high. It's one of the highest. You drain your balance very, very quickly, right? So there is a little bit of mistrust there because of that. But also, even in the US, right? Even in the US, here all the operators get 5 megahertz of spectrum. In the US, operators have 20 megahertz of spectrum in some places, right? But even there, right? Until iPhone came along, the spectrum was completely unutilized. Okay? So what I mean to say is that spectrum's there is only one part of the problem. It's only one part of the equation, right? So, and this is even the developed markets. Until iPhone came, until this whole thing burst open, you are not filling up their capacity, right? And now you won't hear arguments that we are bleeding in the US. In the Europe, I think they're not bleeding anymore now that the iPhone type of experience has come to Europe as well. But just the spectrum alone is not enough. The spectrum and infra, they want to pay a lot of money, but that's where it is even more important that the good value-added services that can generate a lot of revenue for the whole ecosystem is important. And I think if that happens, I think, I don't think bleeding will happen. And in fact, we are seeing for companies like Aparlia, operators are willing to give much higher revenue share because they feel that it's a good service. Everybody's going to make money. That's okay.
Karthee, can you talk about the Q price for a minute?
Yeah. So one thing that I'll talk about is an effort that we are doing called Q price. The second thing we're doing. So basically, the idea is that when we see people like you at Startup Saturday and other events, the biggest place where funding or help is missing is in the early stage. Right? Once a company does a couple of $1 million of revenue, a couple of 10 crores, 15 crores of revenue, there's enough VCs to come and provide capital and things like that. Right? But in the early stage, when you need like 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs to get things going, that's where there's not enough capital for you to go access. So we are a corporate venture capital group, we cannot do too many of these things, but what we decided was we'll do at least once a year, where we invite companies' plans, and then we kind of have a seed investment competition, if you will, called Q Prize. And so we're currently inviting plans from now to December 14. So what we'll do is we'll pick the top 10 plans, we'll come and ask them to present the companies to a panel of VCs, panel of angel investors, and some Qualcomm employees. And the winning company will get $100,000 of convertible debt right there. Right there, winning in a couple of weeks, they'll get the funding. $100,000, 45 lakhs, 44 lakhs. So that's a guaranteed funding. And we are not asking for any specific valuation, it's a convertible debt. What that means is that when you raise more capital down the line to expand the company, whatever valuation you raise it at, this money will convert. So we're not asking for any stake of the company right now, but when you raise more capital, it will convert. So it's set up to be very, very beneficial to the entrepreneurs. And the top winning company will also get to go to the US, where they'll compete against other winners from other regions, China, US, Israel, and Europe, and Korea. And then if you win there as well, if your plan is very good, you get another $150,000 or 65 lakhs of funding as well. But more than that, you get opportunity to present your company in Demo. Demo is one of the very famous conferences in the US where startups typically pay $25,000 to get a chance to pitch their company there. So you get a free chance to pitch that as well. Anyways, we're doing that and we're going to continue to do that every year. But it's really an opportunity for early stage companies. We're looking at mobile early stage technology companies. So that's the focus. I know we have entrepreneurs from all areas here. But the focus is mobile, kind of technology focused, early stage, not necessarily companies that are already raised funding, early stage, opportunity to get like 45 lakhs of funding. If you guys want to go check it out, it's throughprice.com. You can submit your plans. If you have any questions, let me know.
Are you limited only for mobile? This space is only for the mobile alone.
Mobile, telecom, everything is connected. Things are getting connected, right? If you have connectivity type of thing, it's applicable. Yeah. Clean tech probably might not be applicable, but if you have clean tech which has a connectivity based clean tech, then it's applicable.